An elevator is a promise made by a building. You press a number. The doors close. For a few seconds, you surrender any view of the outside world and trust a machine to decide where that number exists. Most of the time, the promise is kept. But floor numbers are not structural facts. Owners skip 13. Architects rename basements. Developers call the fourth floor the fifth because it looks better on a brochure. The elevator accepts those decisions because somebody programmed it to. Tonight, I have 3 original accounts from apartment buildings where the labels and the structure stopped agreeing. In each case, the elevator opened on a floor that was missing from every directory, permit, and lease. The first account is called the half floor. I became superintendent of Lathrop House because the previous superintendent left all his furniture behind. The owner described it as an emergency resignation. Mr. Abernathy had worked there for 11 years, lived in a basement apartment, and disappeared halfway through a Wednesday shift. His keys were found in the elevator. His coat remained on the office hook. The company assumed he had walked out before they could fire him. At 26, I was less interested in the circumstances than the free apartment. Lathrop House was a 7-story brick building completed in 1928. It had 42 apartments, a marble lobby, steam heat, and a brass elevator that had been modernized so many times that almost nothing behind the original doors was original. The owner marketed its age as character. Tenants called it plumbing. My job involved leaks, locks, garbage, boiler checks, and the careful management of residents who believed a person holding a wrench also controlled their neighbors. The building was never silent. Pipes struck in the walls. Floorboards carried arguments. The elevator cables sang whenever the car traveled above the 6th floor. During my first week, 3 tenants complained about people living between 6 and 7. The wording was consistent. They did not say upstairs or downstairs. They said between. Mrs. Vale in apartment 6 heard a telephone ringing inside her ceiling. A graduate student in 7A complained about cigarette smoke rising through the floor, though smoking was prohibited. The family in 6F recorded footsteps crossing overhead at 2 every morning. The steps reached the center of the room, stopped, and continued beneath the apartment above without ever entering it. I blamed pipe chases and old joists. The elevator gave me more practical concerns. It stalled between the 6th and 7th floors whenever the building was quiet. The car did not lose power. Its interior lights remained on, the fan ran, and the door buttons responded. But the floor indicator needle stopped halfway between 6 and 7. After exactly 90 seconds, the elevator continued as if nothing had happened. The service company inspected the controller twice. They found no recorded fault. The third time, the technician asked whether I had been carrying another passenger. I said no. Then who's calling from the landing? He asked. His diagnostic tablet showed repeated hall requests from a device labeled 6M. There was no floor 6M and no M button in the car. We traced the wiring inside the shaft. A cloth-covered cable ran behind the modern controller and disappeared upward through an old conduit. The technician refused to follow it because the building plans showed no landing between 6 and 7. He disconnected the lead. That night, the elevator stopped for 6 minutes. Through the closed doors, I heard somebody slide a metal gate aside. Then a man said, "This one isn't on the list." A woman answered, "Send him back until he is." The car continued to 7. I took the stairs down. The following morning, the management office called to ask why I had slept in a vacant apartment. I assumed an administrator had entered my move-in incorrectly. She restored the account while I waited. The elevator did not stall again for 3 nights. The next person removed from the system was Jonah Bell in 6F. Jonah was 68 and had lived in the building since before I was born. He paid by check on the first day of every month and kept photocopies of every lease. A software migration marked his unit vacant because the company could not find a digital renewal. At 1:52 on Friday morning, the elevator took Jonah from the lobby to the 6th floor. He never reached his apartment. Security video showed him enter the car carrying groceries. The floor indicator rose past 5, reached the space between 6 and 7, and held there. The camera feed broke into static for 90 seconds. When the image returned, the car was empty. The grocery bag remained on the floor. Management said Jonah had moved out. His unit was still locked from the outside. His medicine, wallet, and shoes remained inside. His cat waited beside an empty food bowl. But the company's system showed a completed move out at 1:53 a.m., 1 minute after the elevator stopped. I called police. They reviewed the video and opened a missing person report. The owner told me not to mention the non-existent landing because it would confuse the investigation. That afternoon, I measured the shaft. The distance from the 6th floor sill to the 7th floor sill was 21 feet 8 inches. Every other floor was 10 feet 10 inches. Lathrop House contained a full story between 6 and 7. From the street, that space appeared as a decorative brick band without windows. I had assumed it concealed beams and mechanical ducts. The original permit called it an ornamental cornice. A renovation drawing from 1949 labeled it inaccessible void. The building's 1928 elevator blueprint showed a landing. It was marked 6.5. I found the drawing folded behind the boiler log in Mr. Abernathy's desk. He had circled the landing and written a warning beside it. Never erase a tenant until the elevator sees them leave. Inside another drawer, I found a card index containing every person who had lived at Lathrop House. The cards went back to opening day. Most had an arrival date and departure date. Dozens contained arrival dates only. Jonah's card was already there. The ink looked old. His arrival date was 1986. Beneath it, someone had written Friday's date and the time 1:53 a.m. There was no word indicating whether that was a departure. On Sunday, Mrs. Vale's tenant account disappeared. She called me from 6C before the elevator could reach her floor. Her electronic key had stopped working. The management portal showed the apartment available for immediate lease. I took the stairs and opened her door with the mechanical master. Then I called the property company's emergency line and kept the administrator on the phone until Mrs. Vale's profile was restored. At the exact moment her name reappeared, the elevator stopped between floors. Something struck the doors from the other side. The car descended to the lobby empty. On its floor lay an old lease application bearing Mrs. Vale's name, written in handwriting that was not hers. The application requested apartment 6M. I decided to find the hidden landing before the software erased someone I could not restore. The elevator service key allowed inspection mode. At midnight, I entered the empty car, inserted the key, and held the door close button while turning the controller 2 positions past normal. The display went blank. I pressed 6 and 7 together. The car rose. Above 6, it slowed. The indicator needle moved into the unnumbered space and stopped. The modern inner doors opened first. A brass scissor gate stood behind them. It was not part of the current car. Its metal was dark with age, and a hand waited on the other side. The fingers curled around the gate and pulled it open. An empty corridor extended beyond the elevator. The ceiling was low. Bare bulbs hung above faded wallpaper. Apartment doors stood on both sides, too close together to fit the exterior dimensions of the building. Wet footprints crossed the dusty floor and disappeared beneath one door. A brass plate beside the elevator read 6M. I blocked the doors with my toolbox and stepped out. The corridor smelled of coal smoke, old fabric, and food cooking somewhere far away. Telephones rang behind closed doors. Radios played programs too faint to recognize. Through the ceiling, I heard modern tenants moving in apartments above. Beneath the floor came the voices from 6. The hidden level occupied the thickness between them. I found Jonah's grocery bag outside the 4th door. Inside was an apartment preserved from the 1930s. Furniture stood under gray sheets. A rotary telephone sat beside a cup of tea that was still steaming. The window looked directly onto a brick wall inches away. Jonah sat at the kitchen table. He had been missing for 3 days. He believed 90 seconds had passed. He said the elevator opened and a uniformed operator told him his apartment had been reassigned. The operator brought him to this room to wait while the registry was corrected. Whenever Jonah tried the corridor, every door led back to the same kitchen. The telephone rang. I answered. Mr. Abernathy was on the line. He sounded distant but calm. He told me Lathrop House had used the half floor during the Depression to hide unregistered tenants. The owner rented rooms there without reporting occupancy or paying required fees. When inspectors came, the elevator operator skipped the landing and the registry omitted every person who lived there. In 1933, tenants organized a rent strike. The owner deleted their names and told the city the floor was vacant. The elevator accepted the change. It stopped delivering them to the listed building. After that, the half floor collected anyone whose record said they had left before their body crossed the lobby. A clerical error, an illegal eviction, a missing renewal, or a superintendent removed from payroll could be enough. The elevator resolved the conflict by moving the person to the only level where unlisted tenants belonged. I asked where Abernathy was. I let them delete me before I handed over the keys, he said. The building considered my shift unfinished. Behind him, dozens of telephones began ringing. He told me the property software had scheduled an automatic cleanup at 2 a.m. Every account missing a digital lease would be marked inactive. Lathrop House had 19 long-term tenants whose paperwork existed only on paper. It was 1:47. Jonah and I returned to the corridor. The elevator doors were closing around my toolbox. I forced them apart, but the car had already left. The shaft beyond the brass gate contained no cables, only brick. Apartment doors opened along the hall. People stood inside rooms lit by different decades. I saw work uniforms, house dresses, winter coats, and faces that had waited longer than the building had admitted they existed. None stepped into the corridor. Mrs. Vale restored Jonah first. The brick wall behind the brass gate split down the center. The elevator car appeared. Jonah stepped inside and vanished upward before the doors fully opened. My profile required an employment authorization Mrs. Vale did not have. The cleanup clock reached 2. Every apartment door on 6M opened. The people inside spoke my name. I used the paper card from Mr. Abernathy's desk. I had taken a photograph of it earlier. In the notes field, beneath my arrival date, he had written a departure procedure. A superintendent leaves only after the replacement accepts the keys in the lobby. I called the owner. It took 3 attempts before he answered. I told him about Jonah, the hidden floor, and the 19 accounts his software had nearly removed. He threatened to terminate me. I said, I accept. Meet me in the lobby for the keys. The elevator doors opened. I entered before the owner understood what he had agreed to. The car descended to the lobby. Jonah and Mrs. Vale waited beside the mailboxes. At 2:07, the owner arrived in a coat over his pajamas. I placed the keys in his hand. The half-floor voices stopped saying my name. I moved out that morning. Jonah remained in Lathrop House until his actual death 4 years later. Mrs. Vale kept the paper card index and refused every software update. The elevator continued to stall occasionally, but no registered tenant disappeared. The owner sold the building last year. The new company renovated the lobby, replaced the brass elevator, and converted all records to a cloud system. They advertise 48 apartments now instead of 42. Last month, I received an automated welcome email. It said my application for apartment 6M had been approved. My move-in is scheduled for 1:53 tomorrow morning. The email says I do not need to bring keys. The elevator will recognize me. The second account is called Level 0. I worked overnight at North Bank Commons, a modern apartment complex that was proud of not needing keys. Residents entered with phones. Visitors received temporary codes. Elevators read credentials and selected the correct floor automatically. A central property system controlled doors, deliveries, parking, climate, and every name in the lobby directory. My official title was Resident Services Coordinator. In practice, I sat behind a desk from 11 at night until 7 in the morning and apologized for machines. North Bank had 18 residential floors and 2 parking levels. The elevator buttons began with B2, B1, L, then 1 through 18. Construction drawings showed a reinforced foundation slab directly beneath B2. There was no level 0. The delivery receipts began there anyway. Every morning, grocery bags and restaurant orders were found in the B2 elevator lobby. The receipts listed apartments such as 0 to 14 and 0 to 27. The customers' names belonged to former tenants. I assumed delivery drivers were selecting the wrong floor. Then I checked the cameras. At 2:30 each night, the service elevator arrived in B2 empty. Its display showed a 0. The doors opened, and bags appeared inside the car one by one. No person placed them there. The car descended before each appearance, though B2 was the lowest physical landing. Position sensors showed it traveling another 12 feet. The camera feed became gray. When the elevator returned, another order stood on the floor. I submitted a maintenance request. The property manager closed it with one sentence. Level 0 is a database placeholder. Do not attempt access. That wording bothered me more than a denial would have. I searched the resident system. When a lease ended, the software moved the tenant profile to a holding location labeled Floor 0. The company retained payment history, access logs, and maintenance records for 7 years. Former residents were invisible in the active directory, but still counted in the archive. There were 806 profiles on Level 0. One belonged to Alma Ruiz, the concierge who trained me. Alma had disappeared 6 months earlier after an argument with management. Her final shift ended at 2:31 a.m. Security footage showed her entering the service elevator with a box of desk belongings. The company told us she resigned and moved out of her staff unit. Her access history showed one final trip. Destination, 0. I called the number in her archived profile. A woman answered after one ring. She whispered that she could see me through the lobby windows. The glass wall beside my desk looked onto the street. It was raining. Nobody stood outside. Not those windows, Alma said. The ones below you. The call ended. I went to B2 with the maintenance override card. At 2:30, the service elevator arrived. A paper bag waited inside, warm from a restaurant kitchen. The receipt belonged to Alma and listed apartment 0-06. I entered the car and selected B2. Then I held the door button and scanned the override twice, the sequence used to reach the elevator machine room. The display changed to 0. The car descended. My ears adjusted to a pressure change. The trip lasted 6 seconds. North Bank's foundation was less than 4 feet below the B2 sill. The elevator traveled 12. The doors opened onto a second lobby. It was a damp copy of the lobby above. The reception desk, mailboxes, plants, and furniture occupied the same positions. The ceiling was lower and stained with water. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled one wall, but compacted black soil pressed against the glass. Dim lights shone through it at different depths, as if other buried buildings surrounded us. The wall clock had no hands. Alma stood behind the duplicate desk. She wore the same clothes from her final shift and had not aged 6 months. Her cardboard box sat beside the chair. She believed she had been below for 9 hours. She told me Level 0 had existed since North Bank opened. The development company financed construction with a loan that required occupancy above 95%. Move-outs threatened that target. Instead of removing former tenants from the system, management reassigned them to a non-public floor. The reports continued counting their leases as occupied until new residents replaced them. The accounting trick created a location before it created rooms. At first, only elevator logs mentioned 0. Then undeliverable mail arrived. Maintenance staff heard water running beneath the garage. Eventually, the service car began taking people whose profiles were moved before they physically left. Management knew. They treated the level as a retention problem. Alma discovered it during an audit. The company terminated her account before she left the building. The elevator brought her down. She pointed to the mailboxes. Hundreds carried former residents' names. Most were silent and dusty. 37 had small green lights. Those people were currently on the floor. The corridor beyond the lobby contained apartments arranged like North Bank's, but the numbers all began with 0. Moving boxes stood outside doors. Shoes waited on mats. From behind the walls came televisions, plumbing, and quiet conversation. The apartments were assembled from whatever each tenant had left in the active building. A forgotten chair, a box in storage, digital photographs from a maintenance inspection. Rooms ended abruptly where the archive contained no information. One kitchen had cabinets and appliances, but no ceiling. Another bedroom opened directly against packed earth. Alma showed me apartment 0 to 14. The active tenant record belonged to Donna Lee, a nurse who had lived on 7. Management told us she transferred to another city after complaining about mold. Her unit was renovated and leased again. I had personally forwarded 2 boxes of mail to the address the company provided. Donna opened the door below us. She wore hospital scrubs and believed she had finished a night shift 3 days earlier. Her phone showed 6 weeks had passed. The apartment contained her old bedroom and half of the kitchen from 7, but the front door opened where the refrigerator should have been. Her packed moving boxes stood against a wall made of damp soil. She never requested a transfer. After she reported mold to the city, management closed her resident profile, sent a notice to an email address she did not own, and marked the move complete. The elevator took her down when she left for work. Apartment 0 to 19 belonged to a college student whose parents were told he withdrew from school. Apartment 0 to 22 held a family listed as relocated after a burst pipe. Their old unit had been repaired before the fire department knew anyone was missing. The floor was not an accidental side effect anymore. Somebody in management had learned how to use it. Alma discovered a special account called Resident Transition. It could deactivate a profile, summon the service elevator, and clear a unit without generating an eviction case. Tenants with complaints, disputed rent, or leases the company wanted to end were assigned to zero. The active building forgot them. Their belongings were cataloged, removed, and used to complete the underground copy. Not every mailbox held a person. Dark boxes belonged to residents who had physically left before their records closed. Green lights identified conflicts. People the database declared gone, while some part of the building still recognized their presence. That was why recurring deliveries reached the floor. A grocery service remembered a customer after Northbank did. A package, phone call, or unpaid utility account could preserve enough of a tenant's address to keep their apartment open. Donna asked me whether the street still existed. From her window, soil pressed against the glass. She could see distant headlights moving through it, level with the ceiling, but they never came closer. I told her the street was directly above us. She said, "Then why does the elevator always go down?" Alma's unit contained only her staff bed, a uniform, and the possessions from her desk. She had been living on restaurant orders sent by former tenants who still had recurring accounts. I told her to enter the elevator with me. Her access credential remained inactive. The car doors would not close while she was inside. I called the main desk computer through remote access and tried to restore her profile. My account lacked permission. The building manager had to reactivate a lease before the elevator would recognize a destination above zero. At 2:42, every mailbox light turned green. The nightly data reconciliation had started. Doors opened along the underground corridor. Former tenants stepped into the hall carrying boxes, bags, pets, and sleeping children. Some had disappeared years earlier. They gathered in the lobby and waited for an elevator that refused to accept them. The display above the doors counted upward. 38, 42, 51. New people were being assigned faster than they could reach the lobby. Alma checked the archive terminal behind the desk. A management update had changed the definition of inactive. Any resident without a current digital signature would be moved to holding status. Long-term tenants with scanned paper leases were being removed from active floors. 112 residents were scheduled for zero. The elevator arrived. An elderly man from the 14th floor stood inside in slippers. He held a glass of water and believed he was walking from his bedroom to the kitchen. The car opened behind him, not in front. He stepped backward into the buried lobby before understanding where he was. The doors closed. Another car arrived with a child from 9. Then a woman holding laundry. North Bank was emptying residents into its own accounting placeholder. I pulled the fire alarm. The alarm sounded on every active floor. Elevator recall should have sent all cars to the street lobby and unlocked the stairs. On zero, the sirens remained silent. The elevators continued descending. The fire panel in the duplicate lobby displayed 2 occupancy totals. The active building decreased. Level 0 increased. The sum remained exactly equal to the number reported to the lender. Alma said the building would keep the percentage correct even if it had to move everyone underground. I called the fire department from my phone and reported people trapped below B2. The dispatcher could not enter a floor that did not exist in the emergency address. I gave her the ordinary street address and said the garage was filling with smoke. That brought engines. Then I used the fireman's elevator key stored at the duplicate desk. It was already there, a copy of the key upstairs. Fire service mode overrides resident credentials. I inserted it into the service car and turned it to recall. The display showed L. Alma entered. The doors closed. We sent the elderly man and child with her. The car rose. When it returned, Alma was gone, but the other 2 stood inside again. The elevator had delivered her to the active lobby because I had restored her employee flag through the fire panel. The residents remained archived. It brought them back. We needed active profiles for everyone. The archived mailboxes held the names. The duplicate desk held access to the lender's occupancy report. I could not edit leases, but I could change which floor counted as occupied. I reassigned level 0 as the street lobby. The building accepted the change. Above us, the real lobby became floor 0. For 30 seconds, every active tenant vanished from the directory. The fire panel listed the street as unoccupied. Elevators opened on all floors at once. Then the people in the buried lobby became the building's official residents. Their credentials turned green. We filled the cars. Elevators carried load after load upward. Former tenants emerged into the active lobby beside firefighters who could not explain where they came from. Some had been missing for hours. Others had disappeared years before and wore clothing from the day their accounts closed. Each departure changed the buried architecture. Mailboxes vanished from the wall. Apartment doors sealed behind concrete. Soil cracked the windows. Water poured from ceiling joints as the floor lost the records that held it open. I remained at the terminal until only one mailbox light was green. Mine. My employee profile had been archived the moment I left the desk unattended. The service elevator returned empty. The doors would not accept me because the temporary reassignment was expiring. On the screen, the street lobby changed back to L. Level 0 became a placeholder again. Soil fractured the glass wall. I opened my profile and changed the departure date. The system required a future value. I entered a date 100 years ahead. My credential turned green. The elevator carried me to B2 as the duplicate lobby collapsed behind the doors. Firefighters found me lying beside the service car. Its floor was covered with black soil. Beneath B2, ground-penetrating radar showed solid foundation and undisturbed earth. The company called the event a mass access control failure. They paid settlements to residents and required everyone recovered from 0 to sign confidentiality agreements. Most remembered entering an elevator and immediately reaching the lobby. Alma remembered the entire floor. She sued. The case ended under seal. North Bank replaced its property platform and removed the service elevator's 0 code. The company did not remove the accounting practice. Archived tenants are still assigned to a placeholder floor. I know because the same software now manages my current building. My resident portal says my lease expires in 100 years. But every night at 2:30, the elevator stops below the garage. Delivery bags appear inside. The receipts carry my name and a new address. Apartment 01. The final account is called 42 is occupied. I am an elevator commissioning engineer. I do not repair stuck doors or answer entrapment calls. My work begins after installation, when a building owner needs proof that every car stops level, every safety responds, and every floor exists where the controller believes it does. Astor Tower failed that last test 8 years after it opened. The tower was a 54-story glass apartment building. Its directory listed floors 1 through 41, then 43 through 55. There was no 13 and no 42. Skip numbers are common enough that elevator software includes a feature for them. The physical landing sequence remains continuous while the displays show whatever labels the owner chooses. At Astor, physical landing 42 was supposed to be a mechanical transfer level. Drawings showed a 5-foot cavity filled with structural braces and ventilation ducts. No corridor could fit there, and no elevator door served it. Residents began reporting one anyway. The first was a woman traveling home to floor 47. At 2:42 in the morning, the car stopped. The display showed 42. The doors opened onto a carpeted hall with apartment doors and windows overlooking the city. She remained inside. After 12 seconds, the doors closed and the car continued. Building management called it a display fault. Then residents on 43 complained about noise beneath them. They heard boxes dragged across a floor that should have been 5 feet high. Security guards saw warm light behind the tower's dark mechanical band. A food delivery driver accepted a call from apartment 4207 and disappeared from the service elevator for 3 hours. When he returned, he carried an unsigned deed instead of food. My company received the diagnostic contract. The property director, Iris Tolland, met me in the lobby after midnight. She was an attorney, not an engineer, and knew more about the fault than she initially admitted. She had disabled car 3 because it recorded 19 stops at 42 in 1 week. We opened the controller logs. The elevator's absolute position encoder reported a valid landing between 41 and 43. Door zone sensors activated. The car leveled within 2 millimeters. An interlock opened and closed as if a set of landing doors existed. None of those devices appeared on the wiring schedule. The logs also recorded passenger load. Every trip arrived at 42 heavier than it left. The difference was usually between 100 and 200 pounds. The car behaved as if somebody entered on the missing floor and became weightless before the next stop. At 2:20, I took car 3 to inspection speed. Iris rode with me. We climbed through the numbered floors while I watched shaft position on a service tablet. Above 41, the physical distance should have been 5 feet to the mechanical level, then 11 feet to 43. The car traveled 11 feet and stopped. The tablet displayed a landing identifier that was not in the controller database. Aster 1, level 42. I asked Iris what Aster 1 meant. She said it was the canceled project. Before Aster Tower, another developer planned a 42-story condominium on the same parcel. They excavated the foundation, poured part of the elevator core, and sold pre-construction units. The financing collapsed in 2009. Buyers were promised refunds. Construction stopped at ground level. The current developer purchased the site, reused the foundation, and built the 54-story rental tower above it. Then why does this controller know the old project name? I asked. Iris did not answer. At 2:42, the car switched from inspection to automatic operation without my input. The display showed 42. The doors opened. A luxury corridor extended beyond them. It was full height, with dark wood doors on one side and windows on the other. Rain moved across the glass. The city appeared below, but Aster Tower had no reflection in the neighboring buildings. Where it should have stood was an illuminated construction pit. The view showed the year 2009. My position tablet said the car remained inside a 5-foot mechanical cavity. Iris stepped onto the carpet. The elevator registered her weight as still inside the car. She told me we had 12 seconds before the doors closed. I used a door bypass and followed her. The corridor was longer than the tower was wide. Apartment doors continued past the exterior wall line. Small brass plates held names instead of unit numbers. Some names were tarnished. Others looked newly engraved. I recognized one. Helen Marr. My mother's name. I had not told Iris that Helen Marr was my mother. She died 5 years before Aster Tower called my company. I opened the door. The apartment beyond was furnished with objects from my childhood. Our blue sofa stood beside boxes packed when we moved out of my first home. My mother's record collection lined one wall. A floor lamp she had thrown away 20 years earlier shone near the window. The elevator doors opened directly into the living room from another wall, though the corridor remained behind me. Through the windows, The city ended at the excavation pit. On a table lay a pre-construction sales contract for Unit 4207 in Astor 1. My mother had signed it in 2008. I knew she lost money in a property investment. She never told me the address. The contract promised that her ownership interest would attach to the condominium parcel when any permanent residential structure received an occupancy certificate on the site. Astor 1 was never built, but Astor Tower was. The old purchase agreement had found a structure. Iris entered the apartment carrying a leather folder. She said most Astor 1 buyers accepted refunds, but 23 contracts were never properly released. Some buyers died during litigation. Some could not be located. Their provisional deeds remained in a county archive tied to the foundation parcel. When Astor Tower opened, the title company discovered that those buyers owned fractional interests in any residential common area above the old elevator core. The developer skipped floor 42 to prevent the interest from attaching to a labeled floor. For 8 years, that worked. Then the county digitized the old deeds. The building began creating what the contracts described. Each claimed unit assembled itself from floor plans, sales renderings, and the memories of its purchaser. The elevators served the new landing because elevators were defined as common property in every contract. The mechanical void remained 5 feet high from the outside. Inside the ownership boundary, 42 had as much space as the buyers were promised. I asked why my mother's belongings were there. The deed passed to her estate. Iris said, "You are the sole heir." She opened the leather folder. It contained a quitclaim document transferring my interest to Astor Holdings. The company had not hired me by chance. They needed an owner to make the elevator open, and they needed my signature to make one apartment disappear. I refused. Iris said every other reachable heir had signed. Unit 4207 was the last unresolved title. Without a release, the building's refinancing would fail. If the floor remained occupied, the city could revoke the tower's certificate because 42 had no fire exits, sprinklers, or approved structure. Then evacuate the building, I said. There is no floor to evacuate. Behind us, the elevator doors closed. The living room call button turned red. The apartment lights changed. My mother's possessions became clearer. Labels appeared on the moving boxes in her handwriting. One held photographs from years after 2009. Another contained clothes she wore during her final hospital stay. The floor was not reproducing what she expected when she signed the contract. It was completing the home she believed she had purchased, using every memory attached to her legal identity. The telephone rang. My mother's old number appeared on its display. I did not answer. Iris did. She listened for several seconds and went pale. Her father had also purchased an Astor 1 unit. The building had used her to reach the floor for the same reason it used me. An apartment door opened across the corridor. Iris heard her father call from inside. She left the folder on my table and crossed the hall. The moment she entered his unit, her name appeared on its brass plate beneath his. The door closed. I tried the elevator call button. It remained red. My service radio connected to Car 3's controller, but the controller now showed the elevator at lobby. According to every active system, I had stepped out of the car nowhere. The landing interlock disappeared from the circuit. I returned to the corridor. Doors had opened all along it. Apartments contained incomplete lives. One had furniture, but no walls. Another was only a balcony hanging in rain. I heard telephones ringing and the quiet voices of people being offered homes they had already paid for. At the far end, the corridor window showed dawn approaching over the 2009 skyline. The excavation pit below was changing. Concrete columns rose from it. Floor slabs formed one after another. Aster 1 was building itself upward in the reflectionless city. When it reached 42, the floor around me would become the top of a complete tower. I did not know whether that would make it real or make the current tower unnecessary. I connected my tablet directly to the apartment's elevator panel. The call station used an old serial protocol from the canceled project specifications. It sent one request repeatedly. Owner departure pending. The elevator was waiting for proof that I had surrendered the unit. The quitclaim would provide that proof. Signing it would open the doors and erase the apartment. It would also do exactly what every owner had done to the people on the other missing floors. Declare an occupied place empty before its occupant left. I changed the request. Instead of owner departure, I transmitted fire service recall. The panel rejected it because floor 42 did not exist in the current building. I changed the building identifier from Aster Tower to Aster 1. Every light in the corridor turned on. Sprinklers appeared in the ceiling. Exit signs illuminated. Fire doors closed. By naming the canceled building, I gave its safety system an address. Car 3 answered the recall. The elevator doors opened in every apartment at once. Inside each doorway was the same car. People stepped into it from different units without seeing one another. The load display climbed beyond capacity, but the elevator did not move. It was carrying ownership interests, not bodies. I entered last. Iris stood beside me holding her father's hand. He looked exactly as he did in a framed photograph she carried, but his reflection did not appear in the doors. The corridor outside shortened. Apartment walls folded inward. The 42-story building in the windows reached its roof. The elevator descended. The display did not count floors. It counted contracts. 23, 22, 21. Each number vanished as the car passed a physical landing. Passengers disappeared with them, released into whatever part of the active tower could contain their claim. At 1, Iris's father let go of her hand. The doors opened in the current lobby. Only Iris and I stepped out. Fire alarms sounded throughout Aster Tower. Residents evacuated. On the exterior, the black mechanical band glowed with 23 rows of windows that did not fit inside its height. The city fire department saw them. So did hundreds of residents standing in the street. The owner could no longer describe 42 as a software fault. Inspectors closed the tower for 6 weeks. They found a landing sill, door interlock, and call wiring inside the mechanical void. There was no corridor behind it. The exterior windows disappeared before daylight. County records showed the provisional deeds had all been released at 2:43 a.m., except one. Unit 4207 still belonged to Helen Marr's estate. I never signed the quitclaim. Aster Holdings sued me for interfering with building systems. They withdrew the suit when my attorney requested the original title report. Iris resigned and gave a statement to the city. The refinancing failed. The tower remains occupied. Its public directory still skips 42. Car 3 was removed, but residents say the replacement sometimes opens between floors. I receive a condominium statement every month for Unit 4207. The fees include elevator maintenance, window cleaning, and fire protection. The county says the parcel does not exist, so I cannot sell it. Aster says the unit is not in its building, so I cannot enter through the lobby. Last winter, I stood across the street during a storm. One window in the dark mechanical band was lit. My mother's blue sofa was visible behind the glass. The moving boxes had been unpacked. A figure stood beside the telephone, but I could not see her face from the street. My phone rang. The caller ID showed apartment 4207. I let it ring. Across the street, The tower's elevator indicator moved upward through the lobby display. It passed 41. The missing number appeared. Then every exterior light above it went out. You have been listening to the Ashen Frequency. All 3 accounts in tonight's transmission are original works of fiction. The next time an elevator skips a number, remember that the missing floor may not be empty. It may only be waiting for the building to admit who lives there.